Hey everyone, Pugs here with two new reviews for y'all. Today I'm covering Little Yellow Book and Bumper to Bumper. Well, goddamn, I can't catch a break. I mean, I knew this was coming, of course, but still. And yeah, I'm of course talking about Little Yellow Book. Half of the fandom barely even remembers Bumper to Bumper, and I don't think that's much of an exaggeration. The poor thing has just been overshadowed big time, a fate shared by many of the sister episodes to hugely infamous episodes. Moving on, as always, I want to say thank you to everyone who sat down to watch this video today, or maybe you're standing. Who am I to assume the bodily positions of everyone tuning into my videos? And with that, let's just get right into it. Is there anything more fun than a notorious episode riding the coattails of another notorious episode? Watching paint dry, maybe. I'm kidding. Even if both episodes in question are bad, there's something amusing in their close proximity, something far more entertaining than an activity as dull as that. And let me also just say that I've always disliked Little Yellow Book more than Squid Baby, so this might be a lot of fun. At the very least, the beginning of Little Yellow Book is an improvement over the previous episode. It coincidentally also begins with Squidward relaxing, though this time he's at work and is taking this moment of relaxation when he sees that the restaurant is empty, which it isn't for long. This is actually so relatable. Like, the second you start to let your guard down at work is when shit hits the fan. Every single time. This amusing beginning comes to a swift end, however, once Squidward finds SpongeBob reading his diary. At this point, the plot becomes very predictable once Squidward witnesses SpongeBob getting really defensive about the book. And this is not a plot that I like, at all. And I'm sure y'all can guess why, because it's only one of my most hated things ever. If you thought anything along the lines of secondhand embarrassment, you'd be correct, because that's what this plot almost entirely consists of. Fuck! I hate secondhand embarrassment. So when this episode makes that the entire plot, you best believe I'm immediately unhappy. And y'all, Little Yellow Book doesn't even try to make this embarrassment entertaining, in my opinion. For as much shit as I like to talk about an episode like Hooky, at least it tried. The scenes in this episode of Squidward making SpongeBob do the things that he's written about in his diary are at best boring as hell, and at worst so uncomfortable and unpleasant that I almost want to look away. What makes matters worse is that Squidward is not alone when he does this bullshit. Oh no, he's got a whole audience, and they're all laughing at SpongeBob because they're fucking losers. What is this, Grandma's Kisses? Really, I'm just trying to figure out what's supposed to be entertaining about this. This is just a humiliation ritual that I don't find amusing in any way. It's even worse because all of this is happening to SpongeBob, specifically our childlike main character. Nobody wants to see him humiliated like this, or at least I would hope not. I thought we'd moved on from this kind of bullshit. I mean, the last time we saw anything even close to this was like season 7. Seems that's another bit of rehabilitative work done by season 8 that's been undone. Which reminds me, I've got a bone to pick with Patrick in this episode, but I'll get there in a bit, because first I want to talk about Squidward. Squidward, for perhaps the first time ever, is completely insufferable here. Squidward's been an asshole before, plenty of times, but it's always been at least somewhat amusing, like Fools in April, where he was also completely unjustified. But what he does in this episode crosses the line in every single way for me. The reason why SpongeBob ruining Squidward's day/life is funny is because it's simple misfortune and never done with malice or even intent. Squidward, however, is actively malicious here and is violating SpongeBob's privacy in a far more visceral way than we've ever seen SpongeBob do to Squidward. It's just so unpleasant. And then let's talk about the Bikini Bottomites for a second too. Don't think I forgot about them. This is their worst showing this side of someone's in the kitchen with Sandy, full stop. Like I said, are we watching Grandma's Kisses right now or what? Why are they all horrible people? And their other hypocrisy too. They're laughing at SpongeBob for like 3 minutes straight, but then all of a sudden, when it somehow becomes more clear that Squidward is reading SpongeBob's diary, because seriously, how did they not realize that they were watching, or how did they not realize this when they were watching SpongeBob do the shit that Squidward was saying? They all turn on Squidward. The fuck is that? No, act the way you act with your full chest. Squidward may have been the impetus of this bullshit and the worst offender, but they all deserve severe consequences just like him. And that brings me to the last character I'm pissed off at, which is Patrick. Man, all the goodwill that season 8 had created for this character, gone. Just like that. because what the fuck is this man? Like, actually, him making fun of SpongeBob naming his spatula for no reason and laughing with everyone else, and then also being a huge hypocrite by throwing tomatoes at Squidward later in the episode. He didn't even need to be in this episode. It just pisses me off so bad. They should have had Patrick defend SpongeBob if they were gonna include him, but nope, we get this nonsense. Really, other than SpongeBob, of course, the only character who didn't piss me right off this episode was Mr. Krabs. He's the only one who doesn't listen to Squidward reading the diary, and so he's the only one who can actually chew Squidward out like he does in this episode. Should have fired his ass too. Ooh, Squidward's smugness pissed me off so much in this episode, y'all. Like, y'all don't get it. I'm getting to unhealthy levels of anger here. The only thing I like about this episode is that we get to see SpongeBob's perspective on a lot of things through his diary. I love this guy's endless optimism and joy, which is clearly exhausted to some degree in this episode, which is another reason I don't like it at all. God, this episode really just feels like Fools in April done a million times worse. This episode also spawned the mocking SpongeBob meme, so I guess that's fun. I never really liked that meme all that much, but I'd be remiss if I didn't at least acknowledge it. Seeing Squidward reap what he sowed was also nice, or would have been if it didn't rely on entirely on people being hypocrites, and the episode directly addresses the hypocrisy of the Bikini Bottomites and Patrick, but this goes nowhere, so now all they did was remind me of why I'm pissed off, and I get no satisfaction from it. Even when the episode pulled me back in again by SpongeBob revealing that he had come out on top in this situation by simply selling his diary for people to read, it slaps me in the face by having Squidward start reading SpongeBob's actual diary. For once, seeing Squidward win at the end of the episode is the furthest thing from what I want to see. It's like the formula has been completely screwed up in this episode, and it fucking sucks. Little Yellow Book is immensely annoying and frustrating, with only the smallest iota of satisfaction to be found here. In that way, it's kind of like Dumped, but a whole lot worse. This episode really has me punching the air right now. Best way to get me to dislike an episode is to make me angry, and this episode definitely succeeded in that front. So I guess if that's what it wanted to do, then the execution was flawless. But a flawless execution of rage does not make a good episode. And so this episode is going straight in my abysmal tier, where it comes in with a score of 2.7 out of 10. Congratulations on being 1 of 5, Little Yellow Book. Congratulations. Alright, well, after that crock of shit, we've got Bumper to Bumper, which isn't a notorious or infamous or even disliked episode, and thank God for that. Actually, given that this episode is a boating school episode, we already start on a winning condition. We get to see some Mrs. Puff. Finally, it's her chance to shine in Season 9. We begin with a student taking a driver's test. A competent student. And so the contrast between this first student and SpongeBob is stark, let's just say, and I love it. SpongeBob failing his driving test is just one of those things that almost always works. Like, it's always got some fun visuals and gags going along with it, and so it just always works. Mrs. Puff's utter disdain for SpongeBob here is clear yet again, though I will admit that Demolition Doofus did it better, but that's also because in that episode, Mrs. Puff's homicidal rage towards SpongeBob was the focus of the plot. This episode is more about Mrs. Puff trying to get SpongeBob to pass and get out, much like No Free Rides. Also, I love how this episode references the infinity painting from that one. Also, Mrs. Puff being a jailbird is something else that I find to be inherently funny. Good on Bikini Bottom for hiring people with a record. If only the United States could do the same. But, well, the purpose of incarceration in the US is to reimagine slavery, so, alright. That's all I'll say on that. A SpongeBob review is not the place to get into incarceration in the United States. One thing I love about this episode is that it pretty much explains exactly why SpongeBob can't drive. He just gets too nervous and overthinks it, which makes perfect sense. And I know that some episodes show SpongeBob with the opposite problem, that he doesn't think at all, but I think this is the best interpretation for SpongeBob's lack of driving prowess. I mean, it definitely explains why he can drive perfectly fine sometimes, like in the movie or Greasy Buffoons, or how he's able to drive when he's distracted from thinking about the act of driving, like in Mrs. Puff, You're Fired. And it fits perfectly with his overthinking and perfectionistic tendencies in general. I love it. Mrs. Puff's idea here, though, is honestly a little ridiculous, because if SpongeBob can't drive on the course, how the hell is he gonna fare on a real road? But hey, hilarity ensues, so I can't be mad about this at all. It also reminds me of when I was first learning how to drive. My dad had me in a parking lot for like 30 minutes, and then he was like, okay, get on the road. Fun times. Anyway, it turns out that Mrs. Puff doesn't even take SpongeBob to a real road anyway. They drive to the middle of nowhere, where I again just have to praise these background artists, because these backgrounds are incredible. And seeing SpongeBob become increasingly entranced by Mrs. Puff's advice is enjoyable to watch and becomes even more enjoyable when we transition over to the typical SpongeBob SquarePants chaos. Mrs. Puff is almost ready to pass SpongeBob, but when he loses the road, he freaks out and ends up getting them on a mega superhighway. I just love how whenever driving is shown on any sort of show, especially a kids television show, they always make highways out to be like the final boss of driving. It's funny because to me I think highways are much easier than driving in dense cities or, God forbid, parallel parking. I used to be a pro at that, but that skill has left me over the years. I should probably relearn how to do that. Anyway, the chaos of this last scene is, of course, very fun to watch. I mean, it's SpongeBob failing to drive, along with a cop trying to pull him over, plus Mrs. Puff fearing for her life the entire time. What more could I ask for? I think the reason I always love the ending of a boating school episode is because I love high-speed car chases, and most of the time that's exactly how these sorts of episodes end. Either way, it's a chaos-filled ending, and I love those. I truly do. And of course, even though SpongeBob ends up passing the test in the end, the results are null and void as Mrs. Puff has violated her parole. I always find it funny that out of all the main characters, it's Mrs. Puff who most frequently goes to jail. There's just something amusing in that. Bumper to Bumper was a really good and really fun episode, the exact kind of reset I needed after a few episodes that left a bad taste in my mouth. And for the first time this season, I can finally say that I was so thoroughly entertained, humor and all, that this episode has earned a spot in my amazing tier, where it comes in with a score of 9.1 out of 10. As always, I'll be ending this video with some closing thoughts of mine. Well, Season 9 finally got that coveted amazing tier episode, right at the same time as it got the not-so-coveted abysmal tier episode. Kind of funny how huge of a discrepancy in quality these sister episodes are. I kind of love when that sort of thing happens. It's amusing and a fun contrast. While writing the reviews for this video and the previous, I was thinking about how my negative reviews tend to be longer than the positive ones, and that's because it's easier to be funnier when you're being negative, and I will also nitpick a whole lot more if I'm being negative, but it does make me wonder how, if at all, I could add more substance to my positive reviews. I'm not sure. Although I will say, once I get to a certain point in my reviews, that will, no longer be a problem. Y'all thought these reviews were long now? If you're on SpongeBob Mania, go look at the reviews I've written for Season 14. That shit is ridiculous, and I can't shrink them even if I tried. And then I'll wonder why it takes me an hour to watch an 11-minute episode. Alright, I think that's all I've got for y'all today. I don't have anything further to say that's strictly about either of these episodes, and so I'm gonna close things out here, and I'll see y'all in the next review.